Marcus Chen stood in the vast crystalline chamber, his worn boots echoing against the translucent floor. Around him, dozens of massive dragon-like beings loomed, their scales shimmering with colors that had no names in human language. Each creature stood at least 20 feet tall, with wings that could blot out stars and eyes that burned with ancient wisdom. The Draknari Council had been debating for 3 hours. Marcus waited patiently, his hands clasped behind his back, trying not to show how much his legs ached from standing. At 17, he was already taller than most humans, but here among these giants, he felt like a child. "The human cannot lead us," rumbled Veilthox, the largest of the dragons. His voice shook the chamber walls. "He has no wings, no flame, no true understanding of our ways. How can one so small and weak guide the Draknari Confederation across the void between stars?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. Marcus had heard it all before during his 3 months on their homeworld of Paraxis. The Draknari were an ancient race, older than human civilization by millions of years. They had ruled 1,000 star systems when humans were still learning to make fire. Now, facing extinction from a mysterious plague that was killing their kind, they needed a new type of leader. Their prophecies spoke of an outsider who would save them, but few believed a human could be that savior. "The boy has proven his intelligence," spoke Nyxara, a sleek female dragon with silver scales. "He solved the quantum navigation paradox in mere days, something our best scholars worked on for centuries. He redesigned our fusion cores to run 30% more efficiently. Perhaps wisdom is not measured in size or flame." "Tricks and puzzles," snorted Gorvin, a scarred warrior dragon. "Leadership requires strength. This human child would break like a twig in real battle. When the Void Hunters come for our remaining colonies, what will he do? Throw math equations at them." Marcus finally spoke, his voice calm but carrying through the chamber. "I understand your concerns. I know I don't look like much compared to any of you, but leadership isn't about being the biggest or strongest in the room. It's about making decisions that serve everyone, not just yourself." "Pretty words," Veilthox said with a dismissive snort that sent small jets of flame from his nostrils. "But words do not win wars or save dying worlds. You humans live for mere decades. We have existed for millennia. What could you possibly teach us about survival?" The young human straightened his shoulders. "Maybe that's exactly the problem. You've been doing the same things for so long that you can't see new solutions. Sometimes an outside perspective is exactly what you need." A younger dragon named Zephix stepped forward. Unlike the others, his scales were a deep blue-green and he was smaller, probably only a few centuries old. "The human speaks truth. Our old ways are failing. The star plague has already claimed 12 worlds. Our traditional medicines do nothing. Our ancient warriors fall before enemies we don't understand. Perhaps it is time to try something different." "Silence, youngling," Veilthox commanded. "You have not yet earned the right to speak in this council." Marcus felt a flash of anger but kept his voice level. "On my world, we have a saying, 'Out of the mouths of babes.' It means sometimes the youngest among us see truths that experience has blinded us to. Maybe you should listen to him." The great dragon's eyes blazed with fury. "You dare lecture us on wisdom, human? You who have existed for less than a cosmic heartbeat. Your species has barely learned to leave your own star system." "And yet here I am," Marcus replied quietly. "On a world 47 light-years from Earth, speaking to beings who could incinerate me with a breath. I didn't get here by being small or weak. I got here by being curious, adaptable, and willing to learn from anyone who had something to teach me." The chamber fell silent. Several dragons exchanged glances, their massive heads tilting as they considered his words. Marcus pressed on. "You're facing extinction because you're fighting a war the old way against an enemy that doesn't follow old rules. The Void Hunters aren't like the enemies you've faced before. They're adaptive, they learn from each encounter, they evolve their tactics. To beat them, you need someone who thinks like they do, someone who can change and grow and find new answers." "The boy has courage," admitted Thix, an ancient female whose scales had turned silver with age. "But courage alone cannot lead the Draknari. There are traditions to uphold, ceremonies to complete. Even if we were to consider his candidacy, he would need to prove himself worthy through the trials of flame." Marcus nodded. He had studied their customs extensively during his time here. The trials of flame were a series of tests that determined fitness for leadership among the Draknari. They involved displays of physical prowess, mental acuity, and spiritual strength. Most importantly, they required the candidate to bond with a Pyrrheus crystal, a living stone, that would only accept those it deemed worthy. "I'm ready for the trials," he said firmly. Laughter erupted from several dragons. Not cruel laughter, but the kind reserved for a child claiming they could lift a mountain. "Human," Veilthox said with something that might have been pity, "the trials have killed Draknari warriors twice your size. The Pyrrheus crystal alone has rejected candidates who trained their entire lives for the honor. You would not survive the first test." "Maybe not," Marcus admitted, "but I'd like to try, unless the great Draknari are afraid a human might succeed where their own warriors have failed." The calculated insult hit its mark. Several dragons drew themselves up to their full height, wings spreading in displays of dominance. But Veilthox held up one massive claw for silence. "Very well," he said slowly. "If the human wishes to throw his life away, we shall not stop him. Tomorrow at dawn, you will begin the trials of flame. When you fail as you surely will, you may return to your tiny world with the knowledge that you at least faced death with honor." The council began to disperse, massive forms flowing out through the chamber's many exits. As the dragons left, Marcus caught glimpses of expressions that ranged from contempt to curiosity to something that might have been hope. Zephyx lingered for a moment, giving the human a respectful nod before following the others. Alone in the vast chamber, Marcus allowed himself a moment of doubt. He had studied everything he could about Draknari culture and history, but the trials were deliberately kept secret from outsiders. He would be going in blind, facing tests designed for beings vastly stronger and more durable than himself. But he had not come this far to give up now. Humanity needed the Draknari alliance. The Void Hunters weren't just threatening dragon worlds, they were moving toward human space as well. If Marcus could somehow earn their trust and acceptance, he might be able to forge the partnership that would save both species. As he walked toward his modest quarters in the guest wing, Marcus thought about the path that had brought him here. An orphan from the asteroid mining colonies, he had earned scholarships through pure academic achievement. His expertise in xenobiology and quantum mathematics had caught the attention of the diplomatic corps just as first contact with the Draknari was established. When the dragons had mentioned their prophecy about an outsider savior, the human delegation had almost laughed. But Marcus had volunteered to try, driven by a mixture of scientific curiosity and desperate hope. The Void Hunters were coming, and humanity's small fleet would not be enough to stop them alone. Now staring up at the alien stars through his quarters' transparent walls, Marcus tried to prepare for whatever the trials would bring. He had no fire, no claws, no wings. But he had something the Draknari had forgotten in their long existence, the desperate innovation of a species that had learned to survive against impossible odds. Tomorrow, he would either prove that humanity deserved a place among the stars, or die trying. Either way, he would show these ancient dragons that humans were not as weak as they appeared. The crystalline city of Pyrrhaxis glittered around him as he finally allowed himself to rest. In a few hours, the trials would begin, and Marcus Chen would discover whether courage and cleverness could triumph over millennia of tradition. He fell asleep dreaming of fire and stars, unaware that in the depths of the city, something ancient and dangerous was beginning to stir, something that would change everything he thought he knew about the Draknari and their mysterious decline. Dawn on Pyrrhaxis was unlike anything Marcus had experienced. 3 suns rose simultaneously, painting the sky in shades of gold, crimson, and deep purple. The crystalline spires of the city caught the light and scattered it into brilliant rainbows that danced across the streets. Despite the beauty, Marcus felt the weight of the coming trials pressing down on him. He had barely finished his morning meal when Zephyx arrived at his quarters. The young dragon had to fold himself nearly in half to fit through the doorway designed for humanoid guests. "The council awaits," Zephyx said, his voice carrying an undertone Marcus couldn't quite identify. "I must warn you, human friend, the first trial has claimed many lives. Even among my people, only 1 in 50 survives it." Marcus shouldered his small pack, containing nothing but water and a few basic tools. "What exactly is the first trial?" "The trial of courage," Zephyx replied as they walked through corridors lined with living crystal that pulsed with inner light. "You must enter the labyrinth of shadows and reach the center without falling prey to your deepest fears. The labyrinth reads your mind and creates illusions based on what terrifies you most." They emerged onto a vast platform carved from black volcanic stone. The Draknari Council had assembled in a circle around a circular opening in the ground. As Marcus approached, he could see stairs spiraling down into absolute darkness. The air rising from the depths carried a strange, sweet scent that made his skin crawl. Veilthok stood at the edge of the opening, his massive form silhouetted against the colorful sky. "Human," he called out, his voice echoing across the platform, "this is your final chance to withdraw with honor. The labyrinth below has driven even experienced Draknari warriors to madness. It will show you things that will haunt you for whatever remains of your short life." Marcus walked to the edge and peered down. The stairs descended beyond the reach of the morning light, vanishing into a darkness that seemed to swallow sound itself. He could feel something down there, a presence that made his teeth ache and his vision blur around the edges. "I understand the risks," he said, surprised by how steady his voice sounded. "How will I know when I've reached the center?" "Oh, you will know," rumbled Thix with what might have been dark amusement. "The center holds the first Pyrrheus crystal. If you are worthy, it will accept you. If not—" She spread her wings in a gesture that clearly meant death. Marcus nodded and started down the stairs. Behind him, he heard the concerned rumbles of the Draknari Council, but their voices quickly faded as he descended into the earth. The walls were smooth black stone that seemed to absorb the light from the entrance above. Soon, he was walking in complete darkness, one hand trailing along the wall to guide him. The stairs ended abruptly, and Marcus found himself in a circular chamber. As his eyes adjusted, he realized the walls here were different. They pulsed with a faint, sickly green light that revealed 3 tunnel entrances leading deeper into the labyrinth. The sweet smell was stronger here, making him slightly nauseated. He chose the middle tunnel and began walking. The passage twisted and turned, sometimes opening into larger chambers, sometimes narrowing until he had to duck his head. The green light grew stronger as he progressed, and with it came whispers, sounds like voices speaking in languages he almost but not quite understood. Then the visions began. The tunnel walls suddenly fell away, and Marcus found himself standing in the ruins of Earth's capital city. Buildings lay in twisted wreckage, their metal frames melted and fused into grotesque sculptures. The sky was the color of old blood, and in the distance, massive ships with impossible angles drifted through the smoky air like mechanical vultures. "You failed them," said a voice behind him. Marcus spun around to see himself an older version, scarred and broken, eyes empty of hope. "You thought you could save everyone, but you were just a child playing with forces beyond your understanding. The Void Hunters came, and humanity burned while you played politics with dragons." "This isn't real," Marcus said aloud, but his voice shook. The vision felt absolutely convincing. He could smell the smoke, feel the heat from the burning ruins, hear the distant screams of the dying. "Isn't it?" his other self asked, smiling with cruel satisfaction. "This is your future, Marcus. This is what happens when orphan boys try to be heroes. Everyone you ever cared about will die because you were too proud to admit you weren't good enough." The vision expanded, showing him scenes of destruction across human space. Colonies burning, ships exploding in silent flowers of light, families torn apart by creatures that moved like living shadows. All of it his fault, all because he had been arrogant enough to think he could succeed where others had failed. Marcus closed his eyes and forced himself to breathe slowly. "Fear is the mind killer," he whispered, quoting an ancient text from Earth. "Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration." When he opened his eyes, the ruins were gone. He stood in the green-lit tunnel again, but now he could hear something else, footsteps behind him, getting closer. He started walking faster, following the twisting path as it led him deeper into the maze. The next vision hit him as he rounded a sharp corner. Suddenly, he was 8 years old again, standing in the sterile white corridor of the Titan Station orphanage. The director, Mr. Kowalski, loomed over him with that familiar expression of disgust and disappointment. "Another family has decided they don't want you," Kowalski said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "Can you guess why, Marcus? It's because you're broken, defective. No normal family wants a strange little freak who talks to computers better than people." The young Marcus in the vision began to cry, and the adult Marcus felt tears running down his own cheeks. This memory was real, one of dozens of rejections he had endured growing up. The pain was just as sharp now as it had been then. "You'll always be alone," the vision Kowalski continued. No matter how smart you think you are, no matter what you accomplish, you'll never really belong anywhere. The dragons see it too. That's why they're laughing at you behind their claws. They know you're just a broken orphan playing pretend. Marcus stumbled and almost fell as the vision suddenly included sounds laughter from the Draknari Council, whispered conversations about the pathetic human who thought he could lead them. He could see Veilthox shaking his massive head in pity, Nyxara making jokes about human arrogance, even young Zephix rolling his eyes at the deluded Earth-child. "Stop," Marcus said through gritted teeth. "This is what I fear, not what's real." But the visions kept coming. He saw himself failing the trials, rejected by the Pyrrheus crystal, laughed out of the council chambers. He saw the dragons choosing one of their own to lead them, making an alliance with humanity but treating them as junior partners, barely more than pets. He saw himself returning to Earth in shame, spending the rest of his life knowing he had been given the chance to save two species and thrown it away. The worst part was how plausible it all seemed. The visions didn't show him impossible scenarios, they showed him the most likely outcomes of his current path. A young human, barely out of his teens, trying to earn the respect of a species older than his entire civilization. It was absurd. He was absurd. Marcus forced himself to stop walking and leaned against the tunnel wall. The green light pulsed around him like a heartbeat, and the whispers grew louder, more insistent. Some part of him wanted to give up, to turn around and climb back up those stairs. At least then he would still be alive to try something else. But then he thought about the files he had studied on the voyage to Paraxis. Images of void hunter attacks, entire worlds turned into lifeless husks, billions of beings reduced to scattered atoms. The enemy was coming whether he succeeded or failed, and if he gave up now, there might not be another chance for anyone. "I know I might fail," he said to the empty tunnel, his voice growing stronger with each word. "I know the odds are against me. I know I'm probably going to die down here, but I'm going to try anyway because someone has to, because giving up guarantees that everyone dies and trying at least gives us a chance." The visions flickered and began to fade. The tunnel walls solidified around him again, though the green light continued to pulse. Marcus pushed himself away from the wall and started walking again, following the path as it curved and twisted through the bedrock. He was getting close to something, he could feel it. The air was warmer now, and there was a new sound, a low humming that seemed to come from the stone itself. The fear visions tried to return several times, showing him new scenarios of failure and humiliation, but he had found his center now. Each time the illusions began, he acknowledged them and let them pass. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, the tunnel opened into a vast circular chamber. The walls here were covered in the same pulsing green substance, but in the center of the room, something else glowed with white fire. The first Pyrrheus crystal stood 7 feet tall, a perfect spire of what looked like living diamond. Light swirled within its faceted surface, and as Marcus approached, he could hear something like music emanating from its core. The humming sound he had been hearing was coming from this impossible gem. But between Marcus and the crystal, coiled around its base like a protective serpent, lay the largest dragon he had ever seen. This was not one of the council members. This creature was ancient beyond measure, its scales black as the space between stars, its eyes like burning coals. Unlike the other Draknari, this one had 6 wings folded against its sides, and when it breathed, small lightning bolts crackled between its teeth. "So," the ancient dragon said without moving its massive head, "another comes seeking the crystal's blessing. Tell me, little human, what makes you think you are worthy to command the children of fire?" Marcus stepped forward, his fear transformed into determination. The real trial, he realized, was only just beginning. Marcus stood perfectly still, studying the massive dragon coiled around the Pyrrheus crystal. This creature was easily twice the size of Veilthox, and power radiated from its form like heat from a forge. The lightning dancing between its teeth cast flickering shadows on the chamber walls, making the carved symbols seem to writhe and move. "I don't know if I'm worthy," Marcus answered honestly, "but I know I'm determined to try. My people and yours face extinction. If I can help prevent that, then I'll face whatever tests you put before me." The ancient dragon's eyes narrowed, studying him with an intensity that made Marcus feel as if his soul was being weighed. "I am Pyrathan, first among the Draknari, older than your son. I have guarded this crystal since before your species learned to speak. In all that time, only 7 have proven worthy to claim its power, and all of them were of dragon blood." Pirathan uncoiled himself from around the crystal, his massive form filling half the chamber. Each of his movements was precise and controlled, but Marcus could sense the devastating power held in check. When the ancient dragon spread his 6 wings, they nearly touched the chamber walls. The crystal does not merely test worthiness, Pirathan continued, his voice like distant thunder. It reveals truth. It strips away all pretense, all self-deception, all the comfortable lies we tell ourselves about who we are. Are you prepared to face absolute truth about yourself, human child? Marcus thought about the fear visions in the tunnels, how they had shown him his deepest insecurities and doubts. If the crystal's test was even more intense than that, he might not survive with his sanity intact. But he had come too far to turn back now. "I'm ready," he said. Pirathan made a sound that might have been laughter. Ready? How easily the young speak that word. Very well, Marcus Chen of Earth, approach the crystal. But know this, if it rejects you, the shock will likely kill you instantly. Many consider that a mercy compared to what happens to those who survive the rejection. Marcus walked forward slowly, acutely aware of Pirathan's burning gaze following his every step. The Piraeus crystal seemed to pulse brighter as he drew near, and he could feel something probing at the edges of his mind, gentle at first, then more insistent. He stopped 3 feet from the crystal, close enough to touch but hesitating. The light within its faceted surface was mesmerizing, swirling patterns that seemed to hold meaning just beyond his comprehension. Music drifted from its core, harmonies that made his bones resonate in sympathy. "Touch it," Pirathan commanded. "But remember, no deception can hide from the crystal's sight. It will know you completely." Marcus reached out with his right hand, fingers extended toward the crystal's surface. The moment his skin made contact, the world exploded into light and sensation. He was no longer in the chamber. Instead, he found himself standing in a place that existed outside normal space and time, a realm where thoughts became visible and emotions had weight and substance. The Piraeus crystal's consciousness touched his own, vast and ancient and utterly alien. "Show me who you are," the crystal's voice whispered directly into his mind. "Show me your truth." The examination began. Marcus saw himself as he truly was, not the confident young man who had volunteered for this mission, but the frightened orphan who had learned to hide his loneliness behind academic achievement. He saw every moment of doubt, every time he had pretended to understand something he didn't, every lie he had told himself about his own capabilities. The crystal showed him his pride, his desperate need to prove himself worthy of acceptance. It revealed how much of his motivation came not from noble desire to save lives, but from selfish hunger for belonging, for finally being part of something greater than himself. "You seek to lead others when you have never learned to lead yourself," the crystal observed. "You offer wisdom when you are still a child stumbling in darkness. Why should ancient dragons follow one who knows so little about his own nature?" The accusations stung because they held kernels of truth. Marcus was young, inexperienced, driven by personal needs as much as altruistic goals. He wanted to argue, to defend himself, but he had learned in the tunnels that fighting the truth only made it stronger. "You're right," he admitted to the crystal's consciousness. "I am all of those things. I'm scared, I'm proud, I'm desperate to belong somewhere. I don't have all the answers, and I make mistakes all the time." "Then why do you persist in this folly?" Marcus thought carefully before responding. In this place of absolute truth, every word mattered. "Because being imperfect doesn't mean being worthless. Yes, I'm driven partly by selfish needs, but I'm also genuinely willing to sacrifice myself for others. Yes, I'm young and inexperienced, but that means I can learn and adapt in ways that older, more set minds might not." The crystal's presence pressed against his consciousness, examining every nuance of his thoughts and feelings. "Continue." "I don't claim to be the best possible leader," Marcus continued. "I claim to be the leader you have right now at the moment when you need one most. The dragons have been paralyzed by tradition and pride. They can't see solutions because they're too close to their own problems. Sometimes an outsider's ignorance is more valuable than an expert's knowledge. And if you lead them to destruction..." Marcus felt the weight of that possibility, the crushing responsibility of billions of lives depending on his choices. "Then at least they'll die fighting for a chance at survival, instead of dying slowly while debating the proper way to surrender." The crystal's examination deepened, probing memories he had almost forgotten. It showed him the moment he had first read about the Draknari prophecy, the spark of hope that had ignited in his chest. It revealed his careful studies of their culture, his genuine fascination with their history and achievements. It found the moment during his voyage to Paraxis when he had stared out at the stars and sworn to himself that he would either save both species or die in the attempt. "You mean this oath," the crystal observed, "even knowing the cost?" "Especially knowing the cost," Marcus replied. "Anything worth doing has a price. I'm willing to pay it. Even if the price is everything you are. Even if success requires you to become something unrecognizably different from the young human who stands here now." The question gave Marcus pause. He hadn't considered that possibility. What if leadership changed him so fundamentally that the person who emerged was no longer Marcus Chen from the asteroid mining colonies? What if saving everyone required losing himself? "If that's what it takes," he said finally, "then yes, I'd rather be a successful stranger than a familiar failure." The crystal fell silent for a long moment, its consciousness withdrawing to some deep place where Marcus couldn't follow. When it returned, its presence felt different, somehow warmer, more accepting. "You are flawed," it said at last. "Young, inexperienced, driven by needs you barely understand. You will make mistakes that cost lives. You will face choices that have no good answers. You will sometimes fail those who trust you." Marcus braced himself for rejection. And yet the crystal continued, "You possess something many worthier candidates have lacked. You know your limitations and choose to act despite them. You understand that leadership is service, not privilege. Most importantly, you are willing to sacrifice not just your life, but your very identity for the welfare of others." The realm of thought and emotion began to fade, reality reasserting itself around Marcus. He found himself back in the chamber, his hand still pressed against the crystal's surface, but now the gem was singing a different song entirely. The white light had taken on new colors, spirals of gold and silver dancing within the faceted structure. "Impossible," Pirathan whispered, his massive eyes wide with shock. "The crystal accepts you. In 3 million years, I have never seen it respond so strongly to any candidate." Marcus felt the crystal's power flowing into him, changing him in ways he couldn't yet understand. Knowledge flooded his mind, information about Draknari history, culture, and technology that would take lifetimes to acquire naturally. But more than knowledge, he gained something else: the absolute certainty that he was exactly where he needed to be. "The first trial is complete," Pirathan announced, his voice filled with wonder. "But human, you should know what you have accepted will demand everything from you. The crystal's bond cannot be broken. You are now connected to every Draknari in existence, responsible for their welfare in ways you cannot yet comprehend." Marcus nodded, still overwhelmed by the sensations flowing through him. He could feel it now, a vast network of draconic minds spread across the galaxy, each one a point of light in a constellation of consciousness. Some were bright and strong, others flickering and weak. Many were going dark entirely, consumed by the mysterious plague. "I understand," he said. "What's the second trial?" Pirathan's expression shifted to something that might have been respect. "The trial of strength. You must prove that despite your physical limitations, you possess the power to protect those you would lead. But first, you must rest and absorb what the crystal has given you. The changes have only just begun." As they left the chamber together, Marcus walking beside the ancient dragon's massive form, he realized that everything had changed. He was no longer just a human trying to earn alien respect. The crystal's acceptance had made him something new, something that bridged the gap between species. But even as power flowed through him, he remembered the crystal's warning. Leadership would demand everything from him, including perhaps his humanity itself. The question was whether what he became would be worthy of the trust that had been placed in him. Above them, the rest of the Draknari Council waited to learn the results of the first trial. Marcus knew that his acceptance would shock them, but that was only the beginning. 2 more trials remained, each more dangerous than the last, and beyond them lay challenges that would test not just his worthiness to lead, but his ability to save 2 civilizations from extinction. The orphan boy from the asteroid colonies was gone. In his place stood something new, a bridge between worlds, a leader forged in crystal fire, and perhaps the last hope for countless billions of lives hanging in the balance. The news of Marcus's success in the first trial spread through Paraxis like wildfire. When he emerged from the labyrinth with Pirathan beside him, the assembled Draknari Council fell into stunned silence. The ancient dragon's presence alone was shocking enough several council members had never seen him before, knowing of him only through legends. But the sight of the Piraeus crystal's light still flickering around Marcus's form left them speechless. "The crystal has chosen," Pirathan announced, his voice carrying across the platform. "The human has passed the trial of courage and been accepted by the first stone. He is bonded now to all Draknari, connected to our collective consciousness." Veilthox's massive jaw hung open. "Impossible! The crystal has rejected candidates with royal bloodlines, warriors who have conquered entire star systems. How can a human?" "The crystal sees truth, not bloodlines," Pirathan replied with quiet authority. "It has deemed Marcus Chen worthy. Will you dispute the judgment of the first stone?" No dragon would dare challenge the crystal's decision directly, but Marcus could sense their confusion and disbelief through the new connection he shared with them. It was overwhelming at first, waves of emotion and thought from dozens of minds simultaneously. He had to close his eyes and concentrate to filter out the mental noise. "The second trial begins at sunset," Pirathan continued. "The trial of strength will test not just physical power, but the candidate's ability to protect those he would lead. Prepare yourself, Marcus Chen. What comes next will push you beyond your limits." Marcus spent the rest of the day in his quarters, trying to understand the changes happening to him. The knowledge the crystal had imparted was slowly integrating into his consciousness, but it was like trying to drink from a waterfall. Fragments of Draknari history, technology, and culture flickered through his mind faster than he could process them. More unsettling was the constant awareness of other minds. He could feel Zephix's excitement and hope, Nyxara's cautious optimism, Veilthox's bitter skepticism. Deeper in the network, he sensed the pain of dragons dying from the plague, their consciousness fading like candles being snuffed out one by one. When sunset came, painting the sky in shades of fire, Marcus made his way to the trial grounds, a massive amphitheater carved into the side of Mount Paraxis. The arena floor was covered in black sand that absorbed light, creating an area of deep shadows beneath the evening sky. Thousands of Draknari had gathered to witness the trial, their forms creating a living wall of scales and wings around the fighting pit. Pirathan waited in the center of the arena, no longer the mystical guardian, but now clearly acting as trial overseer. Beside him stood something that made Marcus's newly enhanced senses scream in alarm. The creature was roughly humanoid in shape, but twice Marcus's height, covered in armor that seemed to be made from the same black stone as the arena floor. Its eyes glowed with red fire, and when it moved, Marcus could hear the whisper of servomotors and hydraulic systems. This was no living being but a construct, a war machine designed for a single purpose. "The Guardian of Trials," Pirathan announced as Marcus descended the steps to the arena floor. "It has tested Draknari warriors for millennia, adapting its capabilities to match each candidate. For you, human, it will calibrate to your species' physical limitations while still providing a meaningful challenge." Marcus felt the construct's sensors scanning him, measuring everything from his bone density to his reaction time. The machine was beautiful in its own terrifying way, a perfect fusion of technology and purpose, and he was supposed to fight it. "The trial is simple," Pirathan explained. "You must survive for 10 minutes against the Guardian while protecting this." He gestured to a crystal formation that rose from the arena floor behind Marcus, a miniature version of the Piraeus crystal, glowing with soft blue light. "If the Guardian destroys the crystal, you fail. If you flee the arena, you fail. If you die, you fail." "What weapons am I allowed?" Marcus asked, nodding that the construct was already beginning to move, circling him like a predator studying prey. "Whatever you can provide for yourself," Pirathan replied. "Leadership requires resourcefulness." The trial began without further warning. The Guardian suddenly lunged forward, moving with impossible speed for something so large. Marcus barely managed to dive aside as a massive fist shattered the arena floor where he had been standing. The construct's other arm swept around in a backhanded blow that would have taken his head off if he hadn't dropped into a roll. Marcus scrambled away from the Guardian, his mind racing. He had no weapons, no armor, nothing but his wits against a machine designed to kill. The construct turned toward the crystal, apparently deciding that destroying his objective would be easier than catching him. "No," Marcus shouted, throwing himself between the Guardian and the crystal. The machine's fist slammed into his shoulder, sending him flying across the arena. Pain exploded through his body as he hit the ground and rolled, but somehow he managed to get back to his feet. The crystal's light was pulsing in his peripheral vision, and suddenly Marcus understood. The Pyrrheus crystal in the labyrinth had given him more than knowledge, it had changed his physiology in subtle ways. He was stronger now, faster, more durable than any human had a right to be. The bond with the Drachnari consciousness wasn't just mental, it was physical as well. The Guardian came at him again, but this time Marcus was ready. Instead of dodging, he stepped inside the construct's reach and struck at what looked like a joint in its armor. His fist connected with a satisfying crack, and sparks flew from damaged systems. The machine staggered, apparently surprised by the force of the blow. Marcus pressed his advantage, targeting vulnerable points with precision strikes. He wasn't as strong as the Guardian, but he was faster and more agile, able to dance around its attacks while landing his own. But the construct was learning, adapting its tactics to counter his strategy. Its movements became more unpredictable, its attacks more varied. A sweeping kick caught Marcus in the ribs, cracking several bones and sending him sprawling. As he struggled to rise, the Guardian turned again toward the crystal. Through the bond with the Drachnari consciousness, Marcus felt something unexpected. The watching dragons weren't just observing, they were invested in his success. Their hope and determination flowed into him, giving him strength beyond his own physical capabilities. He wasn't fighting alone. Marcus surged to his feet and sprinted toward the Guardian, leaping onto its back and wrapping his arms around what passed for its neck. The construct spun wildly, trying to shake him off, but Marcus held on with desperate strength. He could see an access panel in the machine's armor, sealed with Drachnari writing that he could now somehow read. "Emergency shutdown protocol," he muttered, pressing the correct sequence of symbols. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the Guardian froze, its systems powering down with a series of mechanical sighs. The arena erupted in roars of approval and amazement. Marcus slid off the motionless construct, barely able to stand. His ribs screamed with each breath, and he was pretty sure his left arm was broken, but he was alive, and the crystal behind him still glowed with undiminished light. "Impossible," Velthox breathed from the stands. "He defeated the Guardian in less than 6 minutes. No candidate has ever disabled it so quickly." Pyrrheus landed in the arena beside Marcus, his ancient eyes bright with approval. "Cleverness over strength, adaptation over tradition," he said. "The Guardian was designed to be defeated only through superior combat skill. You found another way." "The Drachnari way wasn't working," Marcus gasped, accepting Pyrrheus' offer of support to stay upright. "Sometimes you have to think outside the arena." "Indeed," the ancient dragon agreed. "You have passed the second trial, but Marcus Chen, what you accomplished here is more significant than you realize. That access panel has been sealed for 3,000 years. The fact that you could read it, understand its purpose, means your bond with our people is deeper than any we have seen before." As medical drones attended to his injuries, Marcus felt the network of Drachnari consciousness around him shifting. The skepticism and doubt were being replaced by something else: genuine respect, even awe. They were beginning to see him not as an alien pretender, but as something new, a hybrid consciousness that belonged to both species and neither. "What's the final trial?" Marcus asked as the medics finished their work. Pyrrheus' expression grew grave. "The trial of wisdom. Tomorrow you will face a problem that has defeated our greatest minds for generations. You must find a solution to the plague that is destroying our people, or watch as everything we are is lost forever." "But I thought the plague was caused by the Void Hunters." "That is what we believed," Pyrrheus replied slowly. "But recent evidence suggests something far worse. The plague may not be an attack, it may be our punishment for an ancient crime. And if that is true, then stopping it will require more than medicine or technology. It will require justice." As the crowds dispersed and the arena fell quiet, Marcus stared up at the alien stars and tried to process what he had learned. Tomorrow he would face the final trial, but already he suspected that earning the dragon's acceptance would be only the beginning of his challenges. Somewhere in the darkness between the stars, the Void Hunters were coming. And if Pyrrheus was right about the plague's true nature, the dragon's greatest enemy might not be the mysterious attackers, but the consequences of their own forgotten past. Marcus had passed 2 trials and gained powers beyond human comprehension. But as he felt the weight of billions of dragon minds depending on him, he wondered if anything could prepare him for what lay ahead. Tomorrow would determine not just his worthiness to lead, but whether the Draknari civilization had any future at all. Marcus spent a sleepless night in meditation, trying to make sense of the knowledge flowing through his enhanced consciousness. The Piraeus Crystal's bond had given him access to vast archives of Draknari history, but much of it was fragmented, as if important pieces had been deliberately obscured or forgotten. As dawn approached, he began to see patterns emerging from the chaos. References to something called the Great Silencing, mentions of a species called the Nithara that had vanished from all records exactly when the Draknari had achieved spaceflight, and recurring symbols that his newfound knowledge translated as the Dead of Flames. When Pirathan arrived to escort him to the final trial, Marcus was ready with questions. "The Nithara," he said without preamble, "what happened to them?" The ancient dragon's step faltered almost imperceptibly. "Where did you learn that name?" "The crystal's memories. They're incomplete, but I can piece together enough. The Nithara were on Paraxis before the Draknari achieved sentience, weren't they? And then they disappeared." Pirathan was quiet for a long moment as they walked through the crystalline corridors. "The trial of wisdom requires you to uncover truth through your own investigation. I cannot simply provide answers." They arrived at the Hall of Memory, a vast domed chamber lined with crystal formations that stored the complete history of Draknari civilization. Thousands of years of records, scientific data, cultural archives, and government documents were contained within the glowing walls. At the center of the hall sat a single chair surrounded by neural interface equipment. "Your task is simple in description," Pirathan explained. "Determine the true cause of the plague that is killing our people and provide a solution. You have until sunset. If you succeed, you will be accepted as the prophesied leader. If you fail, our civilization will die with dignity under traditional leadership." Marcus settled into the chair and activated the neural interface. Instantly, his consciousness expanded to encompass the entire archive. It was overwhelming millions of voices, images, and experiences flooding his mind simultaneously. But his bond with the Piraeus crystal helped him navigate the chaos, following threads of connection that led deeper into Draknari history. What he discovered made his blood run cold. The Nithara had indeed been the first sentient species on Paraxis. They were beings of pure energy, living within the planet's crystal formations and maintaining the delicate balance that allowed life to flourish. When the early Draknari achieved consciousness, the Nithara had welcomed them, sharing knowledge and helping them develop their civilization. For thousands of years, the two species had coexisted peacefully. The Nithara provided wisdom and energy manipulation technology, while the Draknari served as their physical agents in the material world. It was a perfect symbiosis until ambition corrupted it. The records became fragmented here, but Marcus could piece together the horrific truth. A faction of Draknari, led by an ancestor of the current royal bloodlines, had decided that sharing their world with energy beings was beneath their dignity. They developed weapons specifically designed to disrupt the Nithara's energy patterns, trapping them within crystal prisons before systematically destroying them. The genocide had been complete and methodical. Every Nithara was hunted down and eliminated, their energy patterns scattered to the cosmic winds. The Draknari had convinced themselves it was necessary for their survival, that the energy beings were holding them back from their true potential. But the Nithara's final act had been one of terrible justice. With their last collective breath, they had woven a curse into the very fabric of Draknari genetics. It would lie dormant for millions of years, waiting for the right trigger. When the Draknari encountered another species capable of energy manipulation, the Void Hunters the curse would activate, turning their own life force against them in an exact mirror of how they had murdered the Nithara. The plague wasn't a disease or an attack. It was cosmic justice, payment for an ancient genocide that the modern Draknari had forgotten, but their genetics remembered. Marcus pulled back from the interface, his mind reeling from the revelation. Around the hall, the crystal formations pulsed with agitated light, responding to his emotional turmoil. He understood now why the trials were necessary, why leadership of the Draknari required more than political skill. Whoever guided them would need to confront the darkest chapters of their past. But understanding the problem was only half the challenge. Now he had to find a solution. Marcus dove back into the archives, searching for any information about Nithara energy patterns, Draknari genetic structure, and the specific mechanisms of the curse. Hours passed as he traced connections between ancient energy manipulation techniques and modern genetic science. The answer, when it finally came to him, was both elegant and terrible. The curse could be broken, but only through an act of equivalent sacrifice. Just as the Draknari had given up their symbiotic partners to achieve independence, they would have to give up their independence to regain their lives. They needed a new symbiosis, a willing partner who could share their genetic burden and help them metabolize the curse's effects. Humanity. Humans were uniquely suited for the task. Their shorter lifespans meant they could cycle through the curse's effects faster, burning it out of their systems before it became fatal. Their adaptability would allow them to handle the genetic modifications necessary, and their natural empathy would make them willing partners rather than unwilling slaves. But the cost would be enormous. Humans would have to accept permanent genetic alteration, binding themselves to Draknari physiology in ways that would fundamentally change both species. They would become something new, a hybrid consciousness that was neither fully human nor fully dragon. Marcus knew what his choice meant. To save the Draknari, he would have to sacrifice humanity's independence just as the ancient dragons had sacrificed the Nethara. The irony was bitter and perfect. As sunset approached, Pirathan returned with the full Draknari Council. Their massive forms filled the hall, all eyes focused on Marcus as he prepared to deliver his findings. "I know what's causing the plague," he began, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he had to reveal. "And I know how to stop it, but you're not going to like the answer." He explained everything: the forgotten genocide, the Nethara's curse, the cosmic justice that was slowly destroying their civilization. As he spoke, he felt the network of Draknari consciousness reacting with shock, horror, and shame. Many had suspected their ancestors were capable of dark deeds, but this level of systematic evil was beyond their worst fears. "The curse can be broken," Marcus continued, "but only through willing symbiosis with humanity. We would have to merge our species genetically, creating a new form of life that shares the burden of your ancestors' crimes. Humans would become living filters, processing the curse's effects and rendering them harmless." "And the cost to humanity?" Nyxera asked quietly. "We would cease to exist as we are now," Marcus admitted. "The genetic modifications required would change us permanently. Our children would be something new, neither human nor Draknari, but a fusion of both. We would lose our independence just as you lost yours when you destroyed the Nethara." The hall fell silent. Marcus could feel the weight of history pressing down on them all, the accumulated guilt of millions of years finally demanding payment. "There is another way," Veilthok said slowly. "We could accept extinction with honor, face the consequences of our ancestors' crimes without dragging innocent humans down with us." "That's not justice," Marcus replied firmly. "That's just another form of selfishness. The universe doesn't need noble extinction, it needs living beings committed to preventing future atrocities. If our species merge, if we create something new together, we can ensure that what happened to the Nethara never happens again." Pirathan stepped forward, his ancient eyes reflecting the weight of eons. "The choice is not ours alone to make. The Draknari Council can accept your solution, but humanity must also consent. Will your people agree to such a sacrifice?" Marcus thought of Earth, of the asteroid colonies, of the billions of humans spread across their small corner of the galaxy. Would they accept genetic transformation to save an alien species? Would they willingly give up their purely human future? "I don't know," he answered honestly. "But I'll ask them, and I'll recommend acceptance because the alternative is two dead civilizations instead of one living hybrid. That's not really a choice at all." The council voted unanimously to accept his solution and his leadership. As the Piraeus crystal's light blazed around him, marking his formal acceptance as the Draknari leader, Marcus felt the full weight of both species' futures settling on his shoulders. In the distance, sensors detected the first signs of Void Hunter ships approaching the outer system. The enemy that had triggered this cosmic reckoning was coming, and soon Marcus would have to prove that his hybrid leadership could protect both human and dragon colonies from destruction. But first, he had to convince two entire civilizations to voluntarily sacrifice their genetic independence for the sake of survival. It was the kind of impossible task that only a leader forged in crystal fire and cosmic justice could even attempt. As the stars wheeled overhead and alien ships moved through the void, The orphan boy from the asteroid colonies prepared to reshape the destiny of two species. Whether he would save them or damn them remained to be seen, but one thing was certain: the universe would never be the same. The age of pure humans and pure dragons was ending. What would rise from their fusion would either be the greatest hope for galactic peace, or the most dangerous threat the cosmos had ever seen. Only time would tell which,